Tina Kotek got $50,000 from an overcharging insurance behemoth company out of St. Louis, Missouri. Back in 2022, this company, Centene, was referred to by the Oregon Attorney General as one that, quote, took advantage of Oregon when it overcharged Medicaid $17 million for prescription drug benefits. I'm Jeff Eager, and I'm with Oregon Roundup and Oregon Roundup Foundation, and here to talk about our most recent exclusive Oregon news reporting story that published just the other day. Tina Kotek, governor of Oregon, Democrat, obviously, running for re-election in a rematch against Republican Christine Drazan in 2026, received on April 30th of this year, so just a few weeks ago now, a check or payment of some sort in the amount of $50,000 from this company called Centene, Centene, out of St. Louis, Missouri. When I saw that donation come in, I looked at, well, what the heck is Centene? Turns out it's the fourth largest insurance company in the United States. A lot of its business relates to Medicaid and other government-funded healthcare, and Centene has a pretty significant footprint here in the state of Oregon. These companies that work in Medicaid, they make their money by having relationships with government officials so that they get these Medicaid contracts. But back in 2022, Centene was not in the good graces of the state of Oregon, at least according to a press release back then, in which then Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum, who is also a Democrat, said that Centene had taken advantage of Oregon when it overbilled the state $17 million for prescription drug benefits for Medicaid beneficiaries. There was a big press release that came from the state saying, hey, Centene did this bad stuff. Centene agreed to pay the state of Oregon $17 million for those prescription drug overcharges. That's back in 2022, 4 years ago. Now, fast forward to February of this year. In February of 2026, the Oregon Health Authority actually gave the Centene subsidiary called Trillium a big new chunk of Medicaid business in Lane County. About 96,000 new Medicaid beneficiaries are going to be insured or are now insured by this Trillium subsidiary of Centene in Lane County now. That equals about $56 million worth of new business for Centene. That happened on February 1st. Now we're looking at our article. If you're watching this on YouTube or X or Facebook. Centene subsidiary gets a bunch of new business in February of this year. And then 2 months later, Tina Kotek, who's the governor of the state of Oregon, gets this $50,000 contribution from, guess who? Centene, that same company that 4 years previously had, quote unquote, taken advantage of Oregon. Now apparently Centene and Trillium are back in the good graces of Oregon. They get this major expansion of their Medicaid business earlier this year, and then follow it up a couple months later with a $50,000 contribution to Tina Kotek, who is running for governor re-election as governor of the state of Oregon. That contribution is the 8th largest contribution that Kotek has received so far this year as she ramps up for re-election. Most of her biggest contributions are from labor unions, unsurprisingly. But this is a big chunk of dough. $50,000 is a very significant contribution in Oregon politics. And it comes from this company, again, that has this, I guess I'd call it a rocky relationship with the state of Oregon, if you were to believe what the state of Oregon was saying just 4 years ago. Digging a little deeper into this story, so what Trillium is, so Trillium, again, is the subsidiary of Centene, the big corporation based in Missouri. So Trillium is the brand it goes under when it does Medicaid business as a coordinated care organization in Oregon. What a coordinated care organization is is the state of Oregon takes federal Medicaid dollars, mixes them with state dollars to provide health insurance for the poor. That's what Medicaid does. Oregon calls its Medicaid program the Oregon Health Plan. The Oregon Health Plan then contracts with private insurers to provide the actual benefits to Medicaid beneficiaries in the state of Oregon. Those private insurers are called coordinated care organizations. So they're kind of a go-between between the state administering its Medicaid program and the actual Medicaid beneficiary. The way the state does that is it pays a per capita rate to these CCOs, and then per person. So basically, it's $500 and some average throughout the state of Oregon for Medicaid per month per Medicaid beneficiary. So that big chunk of money, so you multiply the number of people that are insured by these CCOs under Medicaid by $500 and some odd, and that's how much money they get paid per month to insure these people. And then the Medicaid beneficiaries, when they receive care somewhere, they submit the claim, or the provider submits the claim to the CCO, and then the CCO pays out the healthcare provider. So the CCOs are trying to get, as much as they can from the state on a monthly basis, and then they try to manage the claims so that they're still making a profit in the case of for-profit entities like Trillium, even though they're paying out Medicaid benefits to these Medicaid beneficiaries. That's the way the system works. One thing about CCOs, a lot of people think they've kept Medicaid costs down in Oregon. Maybe they have, but Medicaid costs in Oregon are blowing apart the state budget right now. And near and dear to my heart, based on our Medicaid fraud reporting, which we've talked about here before, CCOs are not subject to public records requests. So they're not subject to the public records laws. So once claims are made to the CCOs, and the internal workings of the CCOs in paying out Medicaid claims is completely opaque to the public. I can't get those records. We've done this reporting on Uplifting Journey, the fishy behavioral health Medicaid company. They got paid at least $2.3 million directly from the state of Oregon. We know that because the state of Oregon is subject to public records request laws. But then likely there is a much larger dollar figure that has been paid out to Uplifting Journey and related companies like VersaForce via CCOs that we don't know what that amount is. We can't get the CCOs to produce records to us. They will not respond to my questions for information about how much they've paid to these companies. So that's one of the downsides of the CCOs. In any event, back to Trillium. Trillium, as of February of this year, gets a big boost in its Medicaid business in Oregon, thanks to the Oregon Health Authority. Now, who runs the Oregon Health Authority? There's a woman named Dr. Sejal Hathi, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that in some way. Tina Kotek, our governor, appointed her to run the Oregon Health Authority a few years ago. Hathi has had a tumultuous run at the OHA. Soon after getting hired, she announced that she's a physician, that she was going to be part-timing down in, I believe it's at the Stanford Hospital down in the Bay Area, because she doesn't have enough to do with the Oregon Health Authority. The Oregon Health Authority is the largest state agency in Oregon, in large measure because of the amount of Medicaid that it disburses. It is a chronically underperforming agency. I can tell you from personal experience, having interacted with the Oregon Health Authority and reporting on Medicaid-related issues primarily, that OHA in large measure doesn't know what OHA is doing. But its director, Dr. Hathi, does have time to, part-time as a physician down at Stanford in the Bay Area. Another aside about Hathi, she just published an op-ed in the New York Times a few days ago talking about how she believes she didn't receive proper postpartum care when she had her baby daughter a year ago, and proposing major changes to the way that the United States organizes postpartum care for mothers, and so that they're getting the care that they need. Again, this is Hathi going to a national platform, the New York Times, saying, hey, we need to totally redo postpartum care in America, while Hathi is, in theory, presiding over a state agency in Oregon that is not functioning well. So you wonder about Dr. Hathi's focus on the actual nuts and bolts of running a state agency, a very troubled state agency in a very troubled state, Oregon. Anyway, that's an aside about Hathi. Getting back to her. So again, Tina Kotek appoints the head of the Oregon Health Authority. She appointed Dr. Hathi. Dr. Hathi employs whoever, and maybe it was Hathi herself, who decided to award this $56 million worth of new business to Trillium back in February. And then you have this contribution, this $50,000 contribution to to Kotek's campaign just a couple months later as she ramps up for her reelection bid. That is what's going on. It's a very significant contribution. There's a direct correlation between, Kotek's decision making and certainly who she chooses to employ at the Oregon Health Authority, and decisions that are made to give Trillium, the Centene subsidiary, a significant new chunk of business. So if you look at it as an investment, $50,000 for $56 million worth of new business in the state of Oregon, you can see why maybe Centene made that decision. What are the ramifications of this move by Centene giving $50,000 to Tina Kotek right now? Well, I contacted both Kotek's spokesperson and a spokesperson from Centene multiple times last week, asking them for comment on, why do you, in the Centene's case, why did you make this contribution? In Kotek's case, hey, did you happen to know that just 4 years ago, the Democratic Attorney General of your state said that this company had taken advantage of Oregon by overcharging Medicaid to the tune of some $17 million? Neither one got back to me. Kotek's spokesperson didn't get back to me with a comment. Centene's spokesperson didn't get back to me with a comment. It's not unusual, quite frankly. Kotek's people have not responded to my request for comment for a couple years now, ever since I started reporting on stuff that they didn't like me reporting on. That's fine. I'll just keep publishing that I asked them for comment for my stories, and they declined to comment. I wish they would, because I think it would make a better story, and I want to make sure that their side of the story is told. But if they don't respond to me with my questions, I can't do that. So I'll keep telling my readers and my viewers that I'm asking for comment from Tina Kotek's office, and it is not being provided ever. So what are the ramifications for this story, really? So here's what really interests me about this. As I mentioned, Centene is the fourth largest health insurer in the state of Oregon. There has been an upswell, a groundswell, I guess, on the left of hatred toward insurance companies, businesses generally, capitalism generally. But they've taken a special, they put a special target, for lack of a better term, on health insurance companies. It was not long ago that this guy named Luigi Mangione in New York City went and shot in the back the CEO of United Healthcare, the largest company, the largest health insurance company in the country, on the streets of New York City one morning. And Mangione has been feted as something like an anti-capitalist, socialist, democratic socialist of America hero for having murdered a guy who is running the largest health insurance company in the country. So so you have that kind of on the left celebrating the murder of a guy that runs the biggest health insurance company, and then you have this transaction that occurred where Tina Kotek got $50,000 a couple months after her government provided $56 million worth of new business to the fourth largest insurer in the country. And you can see where there might be problems for Tina Kotek on her left. Now, remember that so far this cycle, the Oregon Education Association, which is the largest teachers union in the state of Oregon, has declined to endorse Tina Kotek for re-election. Now, that's not because OEA thinks that Tina Kotek's doing a bad job of running schools. It's because, OEA runs the schools in many respects and has traditionally had a close relationship with Tina Kotek and other left-wing Democrats in the state of Oregon. But OEA doesn't think that Tina Kotek's going far enough to dismantle capitalism in the state of Oregon. Now, that would come as a surprise to many of you who maybe think the state of Oregon is doing a lot too much to dismantle capitalism in Oregon. But there are people to the left of Tina Kotek who think otherwise and who want her to push harder to punish businesses and to, I guess, seize the means of production in Oregon, probably in the case of healthcare, to establish formally a single-payer healthcare system where private businesses aren't even involved. But that is the pressure that Kotek is getting from her left. And now in this story, which we have exclusively reported, no one's picked this story up other than us so far, that Kotek's getting this money from this conglomerate giant health insurance company. If this story catches hold on the left, it will cause problems for Tina Kotek because it magnifies what those leftists are concerned about, which is that Tina Kotek is not adequately anti-capitalist. Here she is taking a big chunk of money from the fourth largest health insurer in the country. She's not on our side. So that's one thing I'm keeping an eye on. Now, I was the one that reported it, so maybe the DSA types in Portland are not going to run with it, but it is a totally factual story, and they can check it by going on to Oregon's campaign finance database and publicly available information about Centene and Trillium. That's how I wrote my story. But it'll be interesting to see whether this story gets traction on the left and contributes to the problems that Tina Kotek is already having, keeping her left flank buttoned down as she heads into the general election in November. I think the other important thing about this story is that it focuses attention on how big of a deal Medicaid is to our state government. In many ways, Medicaid in Oregon plans to spend something like $20 billion on Medicaid over the next 2 years. Medicaid increasingly dominates Oregon's budget, and it does that in part because back during the Obama administration with the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, Oregon absolutely maxed out some temporary Medicaid expansion stuff where they were able to operate it with federal money based on a short-term funding solution from Washington, D.C. That short-term funding solution is gone. Oregon continues to offer enhanced care, expanded care that it's footing the bill for. And as the consumption of those services in Medicaid increases, the amount of the degree to which Medicaid dominates the state budget continues to increase. I was reading something online the other day from the Oregon Health Authority, actually, in which they were talking about how Medicaid spending on behavioral health companies is causing problems for that program, and it's why the Oregon Health Authority for this year actually increased the amount that it allocates for payments out. So basically, it's consumption of budgetary dollars, because it knew these behavioral health expenditures keep expanding. And of course, OHA, what they say is they're expanding because after the pandemic, consumption of behavioral health, which is addiction and mental health stuff, went through the roof, which it did. But if you've been paying attention to our reporting, I think it's very likely that a lot of that growth in Medicaid spending on the behavioral health side is actually fraudulent. That goes back to our reporting on Uplifting Journey and VersaForce, the two companies that are committing what appears to be Medicaid fraud. And in the case of VersaForce, definitely Medicaid fraud in the state of Oregon. We know again that there's at least $2.3 million that's gone straight from the state of Oregon to one of those companies. The total dollars that have flowed through these CCOs, including Trillium, to these behavioral health companies that are fishy as all get out, is also driving the Medicaid problems that the state of Oregon is having, and it's driving the budgetary problems that the state of Oregon is having. And so Medicaid, you can expect Medicaid. We cover a lot of Medicaid stuff here in part because it's such a big deal for our budget and for how the state functions. That is only becoming increasingly the case. And you can see how decisions regarding Medicaid are made, where they are political decisions, where you have a company, in the case of Centene, that went from being pilloried in a state press release about taking advantage of Oregon, and then 4 years later gets $56 million more business from the state of Oregon, and then casually a couple months later kicks in $50,000 to the state's governor. Maybe those things are not connected. Sure seems to me like they likely are. We'll have more reporting on this contribution and others, as well as more reporting on Medicaid fraud in the state of Oregon here at Oregon Roundup and Oregon Roundup Foundation. You can find everything we report on at oregonroundup.substack.com. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit like and subscribe. If you're watching this live on X or Facebook, hit like, hit share, whatever the heck you do on those platforms to tell people you like it. We're trying to help more people find this channel. We're trying to help more people in Oregon see our reporting, because I think what we're doing here is an important part of giving Oregon voters and Oregonians generally a full understanding